All right, let's go ahead and get started. So just for anybody else that's going to join us maybe on YouTube later, I'm just going to read these materials out loud again. Hello, welcome to Wednesday of Nature Week with Jacy. Materials for today, anything from nature, grass, leaves, seeds, etc. Anything that you can find outside. If you don't have those things, no problem. Jacy will talk to you about how to work around that or do something or adjust a little bit. And then paper, glue, scissors, and then for later, if you have any yarn or an old t-shirt, she's gonna do some cool balloon creations with you. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to type it into the chat room and I will pop in and ask Miss Jacy for you. You're also welcome to use the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. With that, I hand you over to Miss Jacy.
Welcome. I am particularly excited about today's session because I am a lover of nature and I am a lover of creativity, and being able to put those two pieces together it makes me very happy and inspires me a lot too, I will say. And I also am very passionate about learning more and more things that I can do to treat this earth better. And one of the things that I have learned is how to make some reusable water balloons. So we'll do these reusable water balloons in the second half of our session. In our first half, I'm going to show you how you can take some different nature items to make something. Now, one of my daughters made this one. You got to use your imagination to connect the pieces, but this is a cat. These are the two ears. This is the cat's body and her tail, or his tail, or their tail, and legs, and the face. All right, so that's one way that you can use those materials. And then over here, my other daughter made an owl. So you can see the owl's feathers that come up above. It's kind of like a great horned owl, maybe a barred owl that have the feathers that look like ears. And then the face and the wings, and a leg fell off. But there's two legs down there. Because I don't know if you knew, but owls actually have very long legs. They're very long, skinny legs, and they run. You can look up videos. Maybe I'll post one on Pinterest later. But so that's a couple examples of how you can use natural objects on a piece of flat cardboard. If you're going to be using larger objects like pine cones and thicker sticks, having a piece of cardboard to glue them onto will probably work a little bit better than a piece of paper. But what I'm going to do with you today is I'm going to show you how to use, I've got some brown butcher paper that I'm going to use to show you how to make a two-dimensional piece of artwork. And then I'll show you how to make a three-dimensional one also. So for anybody who either doesn't know or doesn't remember, anything that's two-dimensional, 2D, is flat. Now, ours is going to come up a little bit. Sometimes in art, you can call that a relief, where it's a two-dimensional piece of artwork, but it has a little bit more depth to it, but it's not quite like a 3D sculpture. So if you do not have the materials that I'm about to show you, you can be as creative as you'd like. You can choose to go with art materials that are already made out of natural things. Maybe you want to use paper and popsicle sticks and string. Maybe you want to use non-natural materials to have a natural picture. So maybe you want to use pipe cleaners and tissue paper, and you can do a nature scene, even though the materials aren't natural. Or I also really liked Natalie's suggestion earlier of doing a blueprint of what you think you might want to make and what materials you may want to use. And you can make your sketch or your blueprint with me now, and then later you can go collect the materials that you might need and then put it together with the natural materials. Or if anyone else, if there's any other questions that you have of what else you can use or any other suggestions that you would like to make, feel free to put that in the chat because I think that'd be really helpful. Okay. So here I have my butcher paper. I am very fortunate in that I have a lot of people in my life that share my common goal of trying to use and reuse as many things as possible. And so a friend of mine who worked at a coffee shop used to get lots of paper like this, and I asked for some, and we use it all the time. So if you'll notice, because it is a reused piece of paper, there's a little hole over here, there's a tear down here. So I'm just gonna fold it in half and get kind of the widest paper I can get that doesn't have a hole or a tear in it. That's also gonna make my base a little bit thicker, so it will handle the glue and the materials I'm gonna put on. So if you notice on this edge, I folded this piece over so I can get the right size. But I'm actually gonna tuck it in once I have this creased here. Like that. So now I have a rectangular piece of paper that I can use as my background or my base that I'm going to glue my natural materials onto. As a little advertisement for July, we are going to have a fantasy week in July, and during that week I'm going to show you how to make books. And when you make books, learning how to fold and crease paper is really important. So just a little advertisement for what's to come. All right, so back to our nature. I've got my base ready. It is a little crinkly, and I'm actually really excited about that because I don't want my picture to be flat. I want it to have a lot of texture to it, and having these extra bumps in the paper is going to add some more texture too. All right, so I've got a bunch of cut grass here, and I did wet it down a little bit. It was sitting out in the sun. You can see this part's a little more dry. This is going to be a little more difficult to work with. So I did wet it down a little bit just to make it easier for it to stay in place where I wanted it to. And then I have some sticks. Just want to show you some differences real fast. This is a stick from a tree that fell out of my yard. I think it's a maple tree. Most of the trees in my yard are maple trees. And you can see it has like this thick bark on the outside. If I wanted to, I could peel that bark off. So keep that in mind. You can always alter your natural materials to make them look like you a little bit different if you want. And then this one is a piece of bamboo that, believe it or not, actually grew right next to my backyard. My neighbor had a bamboo forest for a while, and I have reaped the benefits of all the bamboo that he has grown. And we have a whole bunch of pieces that we use for art, for our garden. But I want you to keep in mind that when you're choosing materials, think about what qualities you want. Do you want something to be a little more smooth, a little bumpier? So that way you'll know either what to collect or what you want to put on your paper. In the same way as when we use art materials, we want to think about what materials will work best for what we want to make. You want to think about how each of the natural materials can be used in that way too. Thinking about what texture it has, what color it has. All right, I've got a bunch of leaves here. And I collected a whole bunch of helicopters, maple seeds. There was a whole bunch of those in my yard. Okay. I'm gonna kind of sort my materials into different piles over here. That way when I need something, I can find it quickly. Ooh, and they turned brown, but these are clover flowers. I collected those also. Okay. Let's see. Oh, Arden, drawing a little cat and gluing flowers and leaves to it. That is another thing to keep in mind. You can combine what you're drawing with what you're gluing. Thank you so much for that reminder, Arden. If you want, you can do the outline of an animal and then fill it in with the natural objects. That's another great way to use natural materials. And then use pencils or markers or even paint also for a mixed media effect. Okay. When making your picture, you want to think through a little bit what you want to do. If you want, you can think of it as this is the ground, right? And this is the sky. And then, put whatever other object you want in the foreground. Or you can cover your entire background and build up from that. That's what I'm going to choose to do today, but keep in mind that you don't have to do it that way. You can also do it in a way where you have your background being a little bit different depending on how you want your picture to be. All right, since I am going to fill my whole background, I'm just going to go ahead and put glue on the whole thing and use my glue brush to spread it out. And my plan is to start by covering my entire page with grass. I forgot to leave my glue upside down before I started working. There we go. Something I'd like to try to keep in mind when I am working with reusable or recycled materials is I try to make choices that will make it so it will still be biodegradable or recyclable afterwards. Sometimes that's really either difficult to do, or maybe it's because I don't have all the knowledge yet. But once you put glue on it, from my understanding, it cannot be recycled and it won't biodegrade as well. If at some point somebody knows of some other choices that we could make to make it a little more environmentally friendly, I would love that information. But it's just something to keep in mind. All right, I'm going to get a thin layer of glue over this whole sheet. And then I'm going to cover it with grass. Something else to keep in mind is where you are working. I am working in a space in my house where if I spill glue on this countertop or if I drop grass on the floor, it's really easy for me to clean it up. So when you are a creator, you need to make sure you are making choices that are not going to negatively impact the people who share your space, your family, and that you're also not going to get yourself banned from creating things in the house. Right? Sometimes if you make too much of a mess, our parents will tell us that we can't do it anymore. So if we show that we can use our materials in a respectful way where we're cleaning up and making good choices, it is more likely that we will be allowed to continue making wonderful messes. All right. Now, I know not all of this is going to stick because it's not all touching the glue. Ooh, or maybe it will. Look at that. Nice. Okay. I don't want that leaf in there quite yet. You snuck in there. Okay. So I've got my background on there. And then when I was collecting materials, because I did find so many of these helicopters, I had already made the decision that I was going to use these to create a pattern, but I want to add a little bit more texture to the background first. So I'm going to add some of these leaves in these more bare spots. I like these darker brown ones. I like this one's all connected. That looks pretty cool. All right, let me add. One of the things to keep in mind when you're making art with natural objects is sometimes when you glue things down, it won't necessarily stay as well as you'd like. If you have either some Mod Podge to put on top, or you can even paint glue on top, or if you let it dry and see what's wiggly and fix what's wiggly before you really pick it up. These are different ways that you can make a piece of artwork that you can keep for a long time. But sometimes it's just about making the artwork, and if it falls off at the end, it's really not that big of a deal. Okay, this will stick a little better when it's a little more dry. I am going to move on to my helicopters. So I had this idea that if I overlap them together, that they might look almost like fish scales. All right, so we'll see what this looks like when it gets all dry. All right, so this is one way that you could make a two-dimensional piece of artwork out of natural materials. Clearly, I could add more. I could try to make a fish shape out of these, or even I also thought these looked like feathers, so maybe a bird. Lots of different things I could do with this, but I have a few more things to show you today. So I'm going to move this two-dimensional relief over that way. And then I'm going to show you very quickly another way that you can use natural materials to make a sculpture. So I've got some more of this butcher paper. I know a lot of people have paper bags from the grocery store. They will also work very well for this same purpose. But this is one way that you can make a tree. So if you have a long piece of paper, brown paper, or even if it's shorter, you just make a shorter tree. The first thing you're going to do is crinkle it up. Kind of make a tube. And then for the trunk, I recommend folding it in half and then twisting it because it'll make it a little bit stronger. And then you can leave these out for a base. If you need, you can use a piece of pipe cleaner to kind of secure the bottom to hold it together. You can also use string, or I have a rubber band is what I'm going to use to kind of keep this upright like this. All right, and then I'm going to add another piece like this around the side to make it a little bit wider. Got my long piece. I'll get a little long. Fold it in half. But this time when I twist it up, I'm going to twist just the top. Because then I want to twist the rest of it around. the space. All right, so that's going to add 2 more legs. Those 2 can stay apart up there, and I'm going to slide that into the rubber band on that side. Make sure that rubber band is nice and tight down there. All right. If you need, you can also, if you have a paper plate, you can cut a hole in the paper plate to help make a base. Otherwise, you may be able to get it to kind of stand up on its own. So my idea here is that I would make a tree. And now that I have these kind of twisted, I can take a pair of scissors and cut out some branches. And then from here, I'm going to use these to help stand up for now. From here, I can use the other things that I collected to glue in there to finish off my sculpture. And again, you can put pipe cleaners in there if you need to help kind of shape it. You can also add, slide some sticks in there if you want it to be a little more rigid, and add those on the end. And then you can add whatever other details you think that you might want. You can paint it. You can cover it with grass, whatever other ideas you have to kind of build on what you have. You can also, if the grown-ups that you live with are okay with this, you can also do the same thing, but then tape it to the wall so that you have a sculpture that's coming out of the wall. Painter's tape is what I would recommend because then it won't take off the paint from your walls, but that's something that you would need to make sure that you check with a grown-up. All right, so those are some different ways that you can use natural materials to create art. If anyone has any questions or suggestions, now would be a great time because we are going to move into our reusable water balloons, which I am very excited about. All right, let me put the rest of the materials back in here. Okay. All right, let's see. Yes, Natalie, I agree. I can't wait to see what people make. I think it was my first camp experience at Ridgeville. I made this suggestion, and one of the campers made a porcupine. She covered the background of the cardboard with dirt. So she covered the whole piece of cardboard with glue, sprinkled all the dirt on, and then she collected a whole bunch of sticks and cut them or broke them at about the same length and put them across the page to look like a porcupine. And then she had little legs and a face. It was super cute. I'm excited to see what else you all make. All right. Looks like there's no questions. Let's move on to the world of reusable water balloons. So I first came across this idea because water balloons are tons of fun. One of my favorite summertime activities. There are so many different things that you can do with water balloons other than just throw them at each other. One suggestion is a water balloon piñata race, where you use a whole bunch of water balloons, maybe reusable, And you put them on tape, like between two trees, and then you have to race and pop the water balloons or just smack the water balloon as you go down the line. So when I was thinking about how much fun they are, but how not great they are for the environment, how when pieces get left in our yards or in our parks, how it gets into our waterways, or sometimes animals eat them. I'm not sure that all that environmental damage is worth, the 10 to 15 minutes that we play with our water balloons. So I started doing a little research, and a few years ago, I came across a woman who created reusable water balloons out of baby blanket yarn. This woman knows how to knit, and she created a pattern that actually looks like a water balloon. It's shaped like a water balloon, and it even has that little tail on the end. I personally am just learning how to knit. It's not going so well, but I'm learning. And so I am not there yet. Maybe someday I'll be able to follow her pattern, but it's not something I can figure out right now. What I did figure out was how to finger knit, which I know a lot of people at Ridgeville already know how to do. So I taught myself how to do that, and then I created these from finger knitting. So I purchased, this is baby blanket yarn. It's 100% cotton. You can use other kinds of yarn also. This kind of yarn is recommended because it acts like a sponge. It'll soak up more water than other kinds of yarn. So if you have access to this, this might make the best water balloon. But if you don't, any kind of yarn will do. And if you don't have yarn, I will show you how to make one out of a t-shirt also. That's probably the easiest way. I thought this was the funnest, so we're going to start with this. Okay. I am going to show you very quickly how to finger knit. I will also post on YouTube the different videos that I watched to learn how to finger knit, because this is something that takes a lot of practice. If you don't know how to finger knit yet, this little 2-minute tutorial I'm going to give you probably won't be enough to get you there. But I'll make sure that you have some access to other videos on Pinterest. And you can always rewatch this on YouTube if you want to. And I know at least a few of you that have joined today know how to finger knit already. So I don't want to spend too much time on this. But so if you take your yarn, you're going to make something called a tail, and you're going to put that tail between your first finger and your thumb. And I like to kind of hold it there a little bit so I don't lose it. So this is going to be called your tail. For the water balloons, you want kind of a longer tail, and I'll show you why in a little bit. And then you have your working yarn that's coming from your ball, or at least what used to be a ball. So when you take your working yarn, your tail stays over here, over by the back of your hand. You're going to take your working yarn and go back and forth between your fingers. So forward, back, forward, back. See how I did that? I just stuck the string back and forth between my fingers around your pinky, and then you're going to go the opposite. Forward, back, so that each finger has some yarn on the front and each finger has some yarn on the back. And look, there's the tail. So we're going to do that again. Forward, back, wrap around your pinky, back, forward. You want to do the opposite, so you have 2 pieces of yarn on each finger. Now you're going to start at your pinky and take the bottom piece of yarn and pull your finger through so that you're only left with 1 piece of yarn. You're going to do that on your ring finger, on your middle finger, and then on your first finger, so that you're left with just 1 on each. And then you're going to do it again. I'm going to wrap it around, grab your pinky all the way in, so that you again have 2 on each, and you bring the bottom one over, and the bottom one over, and the bottom one over, and the bottom one over. All right, so I'm going to do a couple stitches real fast, because you'll see it's growing here. I want to show you when it's a little bit longer how to make the actual water balloons. So forward, back, forward, back, back, forward, back, forward, flip, 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 flip. Woo. I make mistakes sometimes too, because I'm still learning. There, I think that was the way I was supposed to go. Forward, back, forward, back, back, forward, back, forward. Flip, 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 flip. All right, let me do one more. Okay, so for these bigger water balloons, I did make my finger knitting a little bit longer, but so you don't have to sit here and watch me finger knit, which I cannot imagine is any fun. I'm gonna make a little mini water balloon to show you. So I did one finger knitting like this, and then I've got that tail on that side, and I've got my working yarn on this side. So I need to take this off my fingers so I can turn it into the water balloon. I'm going to cut a long piece of yarn on the end. I'm going to take the end that was the working yarn that I just cut. I'm going to slide it in where my pinky is. I'll slide it underneath there. And I'm going to pull it through. And then I can take that off my pinky, do the same thing with my ring finger, slide that extra piece of yarn through, off my ring finger, through my middle finger, through my pointer finger. And I can now pull both ends of my finger knitting and I'll end up with a piece like this. Now, you can tell I'm not a very good finger knitter because you see you've got these little extra loops that are different sizes. That's part of what makes someone an experienced finger knitter, is that all their stitches will look the same. I'm still practicing, but the best part is for the water balloon, it doesn't even matter. All right, so I've got a piece like this, and what I'm gonna do is tie it. Well, first I'm gonna flip it into a circle, and then I'm gonna tie a knot on the end so that I end up with a strand of finger knitting that's like a circle. So here's a bigger one that I made. You can't see the strings because I used them, I tied them in. Once you have this one finished, you're going to make a second one. And with your second one, there's grass on there from our play yesterday. You want to make a second loop, right? So we have your first loop, and you're going to make your second loop by sliding your second set of finger knitting through the first loop and tie it on. And then you end up with these two, let's see, kind of these two separate loops like this once you do that. So that's when you're going to take all this extra string and you're going to slide it through all the other yarn. Natalie put in the chat that she wants to see them in action. I have to say, they gave a better splat than I expected. So we threw them at each other a little bit yesterday. There were some complaints about getting wet, which if you're going to play with water balloons, you got to know that's going to happen. But there was also some games of catch being played. You could play bozo buckets. You could set things up to knock them down. Do all sorts of stuff. All right, so then it doesn't really matter what they look like. It doesn't even really matter if they're all that round because they'll still work and you'll be able to throw them just fine. This is a more complicated way of making the reusable water balloons. You can also make a poof ball like this. Now, this was my original idea when I first was going to make the reusable water balloons, knowing that I didn't know how to knit. I will say that as a parent, I would imagine that if you make a poof ball like this, that eventually that piece of yarn that's holding it all together after you throw it a whole bunch at your siblings or your friends, that string would break, and then you would end up with all these little pieces of yarn all over your yard, which did not sound fun to clean up. But you could do this also. So I will show you how to make a poof ball too, because that's easier than the finger knitting. So if you take your yarn, there's lots of ways to do this, but this is just one way. And I'm going to wrap it around this part of my hand. Not too tight, because I'm going to want to be able to slide a pair of scissors in there. It depends on how big you want it, how thick you want it. I'll try to make them about all the same size just because it looks nicer that way. But again, for the water balloons, it doesn't matter. All right, and you can decide how much yarn you think will work well for you. All right, so now I've got that looped. It's still all in one continual piece. I'm going to carefully slide it off my hand and leave that off to the side. I'm going to cut myself another piece of yarn, and here's what I'm going to do. The yarn that I rolled around my hand, I'm going to place on top of that cut piece of yarn, and I'm going to tie a knot on one side, as tight as I can, and then I'm going to flip it over and tie the knot on the other side. Double knot. And I'm going to flip it over again and double knot on this side in hopes of this all staying in one piece after lots of fun play. Oop, hold on, sorry, I lost the end of that one. Let me try again. There we go. Okay, so you should end up with this, looks kind of like a bow tie sort of thing. You see we have all these loops here. We're going to cut in here and just cut these loops. All right, and then you want to smoosh it up a little bit so it looks more like a ball and less like a bow tie. And if you want, you can also trim off the edges so they're all the same size. I kind of like the wonky craziness of it. All right, so that would be a poof ball style. If you add more yarn, it will look more like this. But that's a poof ball style of reusable water balloon. And I have one more kind. This one I think is not only easier to make, but it's more likely that you'll have the materials. You will need a old t-shirt, I should say, and a rubber band. So it's kind of the same idea as the poof ball, but instead of yarn, we're using cotton material. The reason cotton works so well is it is more absorbent. Natural fibers are more absorbent. Anything that has either spandex or lycra or anything like that doesn't hold water as well. So maybe if you have a bunch of different colored t-shirts, you want to make some fun colored water balloons. Okay, I've got my t-shirt opened up here. I am now going to cut my t-shirt in strips. If you are using these for a water balloon fight, my recommendation is to get several buckets of water and leave them around the space that you're playing, whether you're at the park or you're in your backyard, even if it's just cups of water, whatever you have. That way you can run around and re-dunk your water balloons. Depending on how brave you are or how hot it is outside, you can even put ice water in those cups. So when the water balloons hit you, it's that, whew, that burst of refreshing, cool water balloonness. All right, and then once you have a few of these cut, you can always do more than what I have. If you're working with a group of people, like maybe you and your sibling are doing this together, or your family's doing this together, you can make a little assembly line. Someone can cut the strips and other people can do the other steps. You have a whole bunch of them. But so once you have your strips, let's see here. I'm gonna cut these in half because it'll make this size water balloon a little poofier. So I cut those strips in half and I'm just gonna line them up with each other. I'm gonna stack them on top. If they curl a little bit, not a big deal. It's one of the things that I found very enjoyable about learning how to knit making water balloons, because any mistakes I made really didn't matter. All right, so now I'm gonna go find my trusty rubber band that I lost over here somewhere. And I'm gonna rubber band the middle of the t-shirt stack. All right, now that I have it rubber banded, I am going to pull the different pieces of fabric in different directions. So it takes it out of that kind of flat shape that it was when I put the rubber band on. Make it a little poofier. All right. And that's how you can make it out of a t-shirt. You just need somewhere to dunk them. So like I said earlier, with regular water balloons, you can use tape, or you can even use string or yarn or rope with the reusable water balloons. One really fun thing to do is to have relay races where you hang a bunch of the water balloons off of a rope or tape or whatever it is, and each person has a stick, and you have to go and smack each one and see who can get to the end faster. I'm hoping next summer, when we will hopefully be able to see each other and be together at Ridgeville for camp, that will be one of the things that we'll do. So that's some natural material artwork. Those are some different ways that you can help take care of nature by using reusable water balloons for summer fun. And I'm curious, yes, I'm curious if anybody has any other ideas or suggestions that go along with anything that we did today. And so Natalie was also asking, yes, once you have these made, then you dunk them in water and throw them to each other. You could even, because I'm a little bit of a science nerd, you could even do an experiment where you make some t-shirt ones, some finger knit ones, and some pom-pom ones, and figure out which one each one is best for. I think these would be best for a water balloon fight. They've got some good weight to them. And when they get soaked in water, they're big and heavy. And when they hit, they splat. Haven't tried this one yet. And we only tried a mini one of these when I was doing a practice one. These seem like they would be really fun for relay races, for that game where you toss the water balloon back and forth, and then each time you take a step further back. These seem to work really well for those kinds of games. Natalie is suggesting a socially distanced water balloon fight this summer, and I think that is a phenomenal idea. I am all for that. Let's figure out how we can make that happen in a very safe and fun and memorable way. Well, excellent. That is everything that I have today. I am really excited to see what you all create. We got a few pictures of the dioramas from last week, and I was super, super excited about what people shared with us. I will also admit to you that I made lots of people look at my UFO trying to grab that cow, because that was really, really fun. And that is one of my favorite dioramas I've ever made. I do need to finish it up and add more details though.
It was a cool diorama.
I was so excited.
I really loved Arden's diorama too, the teeny tiny raisin box.
Yes.
That was really cool.
I like that. I hadn't really thought about that in terms of dioramas, doing like the mini ones.
Yeah. Lots of cool stuff. This was so fun, Jacy. It was so fun to watch. I could not wrap my brain around how you were going to make reusable water balloons and somehow fill up the fabric with water. That's what I was trying to imagine. And it's like, the water will spill out. It absorbs it.
It does. And that's why the baby blanket yarn is key, because it really does act like a sponge. And as another eco, you can make sponges and washcloths and stuff out of baby yarn. So you're not using like the cellulose sponges. They'll last longer, and you can throw them in the washing machine.
That's so smart. Very cool. All right. Thank you so much, Jacy. Today was really fun. Thank you all for coming. I'm going to pop my email address down here one more time. And if you or a grown-up wants to email me some pictures of what you've done today, I would love to see them and share them with Jacy, and share them with our Facebook page. All right. We will see you hopefully tomorrow with Jacy again, or tomorrow afternoon with Wes, and then Friday we have Alicia, and then we start a brand new session of camps. We've got a lot of fun stuff happening in July, and we're going to be able to see each other every single day, which is really exciting. I can't wait to see your faces. You don't have to. You don't have to turn your computer screen on, but if you want to, you'll have the option. So stay tuned for updates on that. Thanks so much, Jacy. Bridgeville hug. Bye.
Bye, everybody.